He moves to a forgotten forest for peace, but at 3:17 every night, the trees whispered his name. In 2017, Marcus Reynolds walked away from a high-paying job, a long-term relationship, and city noise in exchange for complete isolation. Burned out and craving silence, he purchased a remote cabin deep in the forest of northern Maine. It was surrounded by thick pine trees that stretched for miles, with no neighbors for over 20 miles in any direction. The cabin had stood untouched for more than a decade. Its previous owner sold it cheap and gave Marcus a simple warning. It's been quiet for a long time. Don't stir things up. Marcus laughed it off. He wasn't superstitious. He just wanted peace. For the first week, everything went perfectly. He chopped wood, read books by lantern light, and kept a journal of wildlife sightings. The stillness, the raw quiet, it felt like therapy. But then the forest began to whisper. It started subtly. Late at night, just as Marcus would blow out the lantern, he'd hear faint murmurs drifting through the trees. It wasn't English, more like hissing syllables in a forgotten language. At first, he thought it was the wind or his imagination, but the sounds moved. They circled the cabin, slow, deliberate, always keeping to the shadows just beyond the windows. On the fifth night, he stepped outside with his hunting rifle, certain it was hikers or maybe some kids playing pranks. He walked the perimeter with a flashlight, but found nothing. No footprints, no rustling branches, just a wall of silent pine trees and a cold that seemed to cling to his skin longer than it should. That silence became haunting. The next morning, he discovered something unsettling. Hanging from the low branches around the clearing were strange wooden carvings. Stick figures, bound with twine and bark, mouths open in a silent scream. Some had red smears across them. Then he counted 14 of them, each swinging slightly in the wind. Disgusted, Marcus burned them in his fire pit. But that night, the whispers returned, closer now, louder. He could hear them clearly circling his cabin, moving clockwise, whispering in that same strange tongue. Then came the knocking, soft at first. Tap, tap, tap. One window, then another. It traveled around the walls, not random banging, rhythmic, measured, as if someone was knocking in a pattern, trying to send a message. He stood frozen in the center of the room, shotgun in hand, heart pounding. "Who's there?" he shouted. Silence, and then a whisper. Not outside, behind him, inside. Marcus spun around and found nothing but his own breath fogging in the air. The next morning, he found claw marks under each window, long, jagged gouges in the wood, as though something had dragged its fingers along the entire perimeter. In front of the door, someone or something had placed a perfect circle of stones. Each stone had a strange symbol carved into it, freshly etched, some still moist as if cut with a sharp object minutes before. That was the day Marcus drove 2 hours to the nearest town. He barged into the local library, demanding books on the region's folklore. The old librarian didn't flinch when he explained what was happening. In fact, she nodded, like she'd heard it before. "You're in the pines," she said softly. "Locals don't go near that forest, not since the 1800s. She handed him a dusty journal compiled by local historians. The book detailed the land's history, sacred ground for a tribe long erased from memory. The tribe believed the pines were alive, protectors of ancient spirits. When settlers forced them out, they cursed the forest. Those who disturbed the balance by cutting down trees, hunting game, or, as the book ominously warned, burning what was already claimed, would suffer. Marcus remembered the wooden totems he had burned. He turned to a page titled Ritual of Appeasement. It involved ash, salt, and blood. Not enough to kill, but enough to mark an offering. It had to be done at 3:17 a.m. exactly, the hour the spirits were strongest and most listening. That night, he prepared everything. He marked the symbols with his own blood, formed a salt circle in the clearing, and burned dried pine needles mixed with ash. The forest watched. He felt it. When the hour struck, the wind stopped. Even the usual night noises, owls, crickets, vanished. He spoke the words from the book. Once, twice, 3 times. The pine trees groaned, not from the wind, but like breathing, as if they exhaled around him. Then, silence. True silence. No whispers, no knocking, just stillness. The next morning, Marcus packed everything and left. He didn't even lock the door behind him. He drove until the trees thinned out and the radio signal returned. He never looked back. Today, Marcus lives in a small apartment in New York. He doesn't hike anymore, doesn't go camping, won't step foot near a forest. And if he hears a breeze outside his window, he turns on every light. When asked about the cabin, he simply says, "The forest wanted to be left alone. I should have listened." But sometimes, just sometimes, when the wind howls through the city streets, he hears the pines, and they whisper his name. They thought the snowstorm was the scariest part of their mountain getaway, until the man in the fire started watching them. In December of 2013, Amber Wright and her fiancé Dave wanted a break from everything: work, traffic, technology. So they rented an isolated, off-grid cabin in the Colorado mountains for a winter vacation. No electricity, no phone service, no Wi-Fi. Just them, a wood-burning stove, and the peaceful silence of snow-covered wilderness. The cabin was beautiful in a rugged way. 2 stories made of log and stone, with antique furniture, a huge fireplace, and one ominous detail. The previous renters had all left vague, short reviews. Most simply said, "Didn't stay long," or "too quiet." Amber shrugged it off. A little mystery added to the adventure. For the first 2 days, things were ideal. They cooked by candlelight, drank wine in front of the fire, and watched snow pile up outside. Dave joked that it felt like being in a snow globe, but on the 3rd night, the weather changed. A blizzard rolled in fast, howling wind, whiteout conditions, snow falling so thick they couldn't see the tree line just 30 feet away. The temperature plummeted below 0. That night, as they huddled by the fire, Amber heard something that didn't belong to the wind. Footsteps on the porch. Slow, crunching, she froze. Dave turned his head too, both of them staring at the frosted front window. A figure stood motionless in the snow. Tall, wearing a long dark coat, head tilted down. Amber gasped, "Dave, someone's out there." Dave grabbed the flashlight and yanked open the door. "Hey, you okay? You need help?" he called out. The beam of the flashlight sliced through the storm, and the figure disappeared. Not ran away, not walked off, vanished like mist. They shut the door and pushed the heavy dining table against it. Neither of them slept much that night. In the morning, they checked the porch. There were footprints, bare feet, human. They started at the edge of the woods and led straight to the cabin steps. But they didn't lead away. Dave tried to rationalize it. Snow can hide trails. Maybe he left the same way. But Amber was unconvinced. She knew what she saw. Later that day, they noticed something else. Their firewood stack was missing. A whole row of logs, gone. No animal could have taken them. That night, they burned furniture to stay warm. The fourth day, more strange things happened. Amber found the bathroom mirror shattered, shards on the floor. Dave hadn't heard anything. They assumed it cracked from the cold until they saw the second mirror in the bedroom, also shattered. No signs of impact, just broken. The cabin was now bitter cold inside. Every few hours, they stoked the fire. Then, Amber saw the window in the kitchen fog up, and on it, words appeared. "Let him in," she screamed. Dave still tried to play the skeptic. "It's stress, cabin fever, snow madness. People get weird out here." But by nightfall, even he couldn't explain what they heard. Scratching, slow, deliberate, against the walls. Not random, like wind or trees. It moved from wall to wall, encircling the cabin. It sounded like nails, fingers. They pushed furniture against every door and window. They didn't speak, didn't even whisper. Then, just after 3 a.m., Amber sat bolt upright. She felt it. Something was in the room. She turned toward the fireplace and stopped breathing. He was standing in the fire, not near it, not by it, inside it. The man from the storm. His coat was untouched by flame, his face pale and hollow, eyes black pits of nothingness. He didn't move, just stared at her. Amber screamed. Dave snapped awake, grabbed the fire poker, and lunged, but the figure vanished again. No scorch marks, no footprints, just flickering flames. This is point. What's it doing here? Why are we building something? There's something out there, and they haven't been spotted. They fled at dawn. Took only what they could carry. The snow had let up slightly, but they hiked 2 miles down the mountain before catching signal and calling for help. Days later, back in Denver, Amber started researching the area. What she found chilled her more than the storm ever did. The land their cabin sat on had once been the site of a 19th century mining town, abandoned after a massive fire in 1896. Several miners died when a fire broke out and trapped them inside their barracks. Most bodies were recovered, except for one man, according to the archives. A man described as quiet, solitary, known to wear a long dark coat even inside. His name was erased from most records. Some say he set the fire himself. Some say he survived it by walking through the flames. The cabin, it turned out, had been built directly over the foundations of the burned barracks. The reviews Amber had seen, the people didn't leave early because they were bored. They were terrified. A few weeks later, Dave went back to grab some tools he'd left behind. Amber begged him not to, but he laughed, said he'd be fine. He was never seen again. His body was never found. Only his phone left on the porch, recording, still running. Last image on the camera, a man, standing in the doorway, smiling in the firelight. Amber moved to Florida. No snow, no mountains, no fireplaces. But sometimes, when it rains and the wind howls, she hears footsteps, crunching, slow, and her windows fog up. They thought the worst part of the cabin was the plumbing, until something started breathing beneath the floorboards. In 2009, Brian and Lydia were newlyweds with a dream. Flip old homes in scenic places and document the journey online. Their first project? A crumbling cabin deep in the Appalachian Hills of West Virginia. The listing was suspiciously cheap, with one line that stuck out. cellar access sealed, do not enter. Of course, that only made them more curious. The cabin had no running water, no electricity, and decades of grime, but the bones were strong. Lydia loved the porch view, mountains like ghosts in the distance, and Brian loved the challenge. On the second day, while cleaning the kitchen, they found it. A wooden trapdoor hidden beneath a warped old rug. They pulled it open. A long, narrow staircase descended into pitch-black dirt. The air that came up was damp, sour, and heavy. Brian went halfway down and shined a flashlight. Looks like a root cellar. Probably where they stored food. But even then, Lydia felt uneasy. On the cellar walls were carvings, hundreds of them. Strange spirals, circles with slashes through them, and one word etched over and over: silence. That night, Lydia asked to seal it back up. It doesn't feel right down there. Brian agreed, mostly to humor her, but they didn't seal it. Not completely. That first night, around 2 a.m., the cabin groaned. Not from the wind. This was deeper, like something inside the walls. Then came the scratching from beneath the floorboards. Light at first, then faster, frantic, like fingernails on wood. Brian thought it was raccoons or rats. He dropped mothballs and set traps. It didn't stop. Then, on the third night, they heard it, breathing, deep, slow, and human. It echoed through the floorboards, rising from the trapdoor. Lydia screamed. Brian ran into the kitchen and saw the trapdoor open on its own. No animals, no wind. He slammed it shut and dragged the heavy fridge over it. Lydia cried that night, too afraid to sleep. Brian stayed awake with a baseball bat, pretending to be calm. But even he was rattled. The next morning, the batteries in every flashlight and lantern were dead. Their phones, plugged into the car, had drained too, despite being fully charged the night before. Then, Lydia noticed something else. Her feet were dirty, caked with fine, cold earth. She had no memory of sleepwalking. And the bedroom door had been locked from the inside. By now, Brian was losing patience. He blamed stress, cabin fever. But when he brought in a local handyman to look at the structure, everything changed. The man, a stocky, older guy named Carl, only stepped halfway down into the cellar before bolting back up, face pale, eyes wide. He refused to return. Bolting back up, face pale, eyes wide. He refused to return. He looked at Brian and whispered, "There's eyes in the dirt, man. Eyes. They were open." That night, Lydia found a note taped to the bathroom mirror. It hadn't been there before. Written in red ink, or possibly something darker, were the words, "You opened it. Now you listen." They packed to leave first thing in the morning. But when they tried to drive out, a massive tree had fallen across the narrow mountain road, blocking their only path. Brian got the chainsaw from the shed. It wouldn't start. Neither did the backup. They were trapped. That night, the laughter began. Low, childlike giggles echoing from beneath the floorboards, followed by growling, long, wet growls that didn't sound human. The cellar trapdoor rattled constantly, beneath the fridge, like something pushing against it. And then, at 3:33 a.m., the fridge slid 6 inches across the floor, on its own. No shaking, no incline. Lydia curled up in the bedroom, humming to herself to drown it out. Brian stood guard in the kitchen, shotgun in hand. On the 5th night, the door burst open. Not the front door, the cellar. The trap door flung open with a bang that cracked the floorboards. something emerged. Brian refuses to say what it was. His memory of that moment is blank. He says it's like someone deleted the image from his mind. But Lydia saw it, and she never spoke again. The next morning, she was sitting in the corner of the bedroom, rocking. She wouldn't blink, wouldn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the floor. Brian drove her to the hospital. She was diagnosed with catatonia, possibly trauma-induced. She never improved. She's still in a care home, eyes open, lips sealed, feet sometimes covered in dirt, though no one knows why. Brian sold the cabin the same week, gave it away for almost nothing. The only warning he left for the buyer was this: don't open the cellar. But people don't listen. The new owners, a family of 4, moved in that fall. They only lasted 2 nights. The sheriff's report mentioned a strange blood trail from the living room to the cellar. The family was never found. The cabin was condemned. But locals say if you hike the ridge at night, you can see lights flickering inside. Lanterns, maybe, or something else. And if you stand real still, real quiet, you might hear breathing rising from the ground, slow, rhythmic, like something waiting.